Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gracefully Graying. Please visit our website, gracefullygraying.com, like us and share us on our social media platform, and visit our YouTube channel, searching for Gracefully Graying. Today, we are very pleased to welcome our guest, Anita Kremer, from Alternatives for Seniors, and we will be discussing all options for senior living and everything around the senior living space. So Anita, welcome to Gracefully Graying.
Thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you and for you to share your knowledge on the senior living space. So first off, I'd like to know exactly how did you start Alternatives for Seniors? And I know it's been around for a while. You're an expert in this. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, my background was in multifamily housing industry. And coincidentally, I had worked on what they called a congregate living facility back in the 80s, which was a senior retirement community in Monroe, Michigan. And I had struggled with how to promote that because I was marketing. And there were very few places to advertise other than the Yellow Pages or in the local newspaper where it would make any sense. Years later, still being in the multifamily housing space, I went out on my own in consulting, and I was hired by a company I had worked for, and they had just acquired a chain of Michigan nursing homes. There were about 15 nursing homes, and they asked me to take a look at them and market them and renovate them and fix them up. And it got me thinking again back to how I couldn't market the nursing homes or the retirement homes. I didn't know how to reach people. So I took my background in marketing apartment communities and decided to follow the apartment guides that were handed out for free throughout areas throughout the country, probably not so much any longer. But I fashioned it after that, and we came out, it took a year, but in 1992 of January, we came out with the Michigan book. And it went on from there. We had communities, not as many categories as there are now, as the industry has changed, but that's how it got started.
Okay. And how did you come up with the name Alternatives for Seniors?
Well, interesting. It was first called Senior Alternatives.
Okay.
And, well, a few things had made us change that. Everything was called senior something, and it was hard to differentiate yourself. But back in 1996, I had a website, senioralternatives.com, and I sold it to Realtor.com at the time. And so I had to change the name, and we wound up liking it better because people remembered alternatives as opposed to another senior magazine or newspaper, etc.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So tell us about the services that you provide.
Well, we started out as a print company only. That was in the days before the web, and we printed a magazine in Michigan, and we distributed to many locations that included hospitals, senior centers, libraries, and places where seniors might find them. So we did that, and we slowly expanded into Chicago and then Ohio. And that's where we are today with the 3 different editions. But in 1996, when it became apparent that you had to be on the internet and the word Google became very popular, we started a website in 96. And the website started out with Michigan information and then slowly grew to include nationwide information.
Right. And I know that folks can go on your website, and there are many, many states represented on your website. Explain a little bit about the intricacies of that.
Well, over the years, we've built up a database, and we work with many national companies. So it's a challenge to keep the names up to date because there's acquiring and new facilities every day, but we keep it pretty up to date throughout the country. So the website allows people to search for what they're looking for and help them if they don't know what they're looking for. And it allows them to request information with an online request form from the communities of interest.
Right. So that's a great service and a pretty immediate service at that.
It is. But we added probably about 7-8 years ago, we realized that we were fielding telephone calls in the office all the time from people wanting information, very often explaining the different housing, financial difficulties, and advising them where they can turn to for assistance. And so we wound up deciding to do it more formally. And we created what we call our information center. We have a director of our information center who is a certified senior advisor with many years experience as a nursing home administrator and in the Alzheimer's dementia field. And Charlene heads that up with other advisors who take the calls from people and assist them. We can assist them with also what communities meet their criteria and sending out the information to the communities so that with one phone call, they've been able to contact multiple locations.
Right. And, it seems like in this day and age when, so many things are digital and, maybe a little bit more impersonal, that personal touch, being able to actually speak to somebody and have them give you information kind of on your own time in a more relaxed setting, I think that's invaluable, right?
Yes, it is. We definitely think so. And we are fielding calls for people for a multitude of we've had homeless people contacting us with what to do. So, we try and be as helpful as we can with directing them and, taking it from there.
Right. So tell us about how do you find your contributors, your resources, your people that you are referring, the facilities that you are referring people to? How do they come to you? How do you get to them? How does that work?
Well, we find out the communities and, we'll either, contact them as we find out about them, the new ones. And many come to us when they find us either online or certainly in the markets where we have the books, they contact us. But we also have, sales reaching out as well to try and get them to participate with us.
Right. And so tell us, and I know that there are many, many options, but take a little time and explain the different options for alternatives for seniors as far as living situations.
Well, the living situations are interesting. They range from senior apartments, which can be for a community, which is really an apartment building or, garden apartment type, where the access is only for age 55 or 62 and older. Many of them could be subsidized or income qualified with a certain percentage of the rent going for the housing. But the difference is that there are no services. It's an apartment. The next step is what we call retirement communities or independent living. And that is an apartment. You get your own little apartment. It can even be as large as a 2-bedroom. And it comes with services, usually meals, which can range from 1 to 2 meals a day, housekeeping, linen service. They can become very elaborate or they can be more simpler. But they usually have trips and they engage the residents in activities throughout the day. Mm-hmm. After that, we have the assisted living category, which when I first started the book in 1992, the assisted living section was minor. There was hardly anything there because people knew a retirement home or a nursing home. And Hollywood still gets that confused. You'll see them talking to an assisted living community and calling it a nursing home and vice versa.
Right. Oh, that's interesting, though. That
stymies me.
Over time, and within, say, how many years would you guess has it become, its own thing, assisted living?
It's been for the last 20 years that it's been a real staple. I mean, I could say our book grew from maybe 5 advertisers to 50 advertisers in that space.
Yeah.
So in the Michigan area. So it's grown dramatically. And, in the past, the elderly would stay with family members. The daughter didn't usually work, and it was very common to find multi-generational homes, and much less common today. So due to females working, but also due to the long distance families that aren't living close by. So right. Assisted living grew out of that need. They used to be called rest homes or home for the aged, not very nice names.
Right, right.
Assisted living, which is like retirement living, with the exception that the residents need help with the activities of daily living, which is known in the industry as ADLs. Mm-hmm. And those activities include eating, bathing, dressing. And often once a resident is up and about for the day, they're on their own. They can wander throughout, and they go to the dining room, and they're dressed and bathed, and they just have safety around them by knowing that there's people around. After that, what has happened over the last few years is the memory care category, which we used to call Alzheimer's and dementia care. It's now just becoming a catch-all phrase, memory care. And memory care was often handled by the assisted living places, but not strictly memory care. And memory care can take on so many different needs from standard assisted living that there started to be standalone memory care facilities that, as opposed to just being included in assisted living. And then, of course, there's the nursing homes, which are skilled nursing facilities where someone needs medical care round the clock, or more medical care than could be handled in an assisted living facility.
Yeah. So obviously it goes, there's a whole gamut, a range of facilities that you are referring to, from seniors or semi-seniors, playing tennis and swimming, to obviously needing a lot of medical attention.
Right.
Would you say that, so like if you broke it down percentage-wise, I mean, typically would it be the kids of the seniors that are contacting you and wanting to know information about their parents, or, tell us about who's calling you exactly?
Interestingly enough, years ago, it was a much higher percentage. I would say 70%, 60% of the family members, usually a daughter, calling for a parent. And now we see more men calling, mm-hmm. and we get a lot of people looking for themselves now. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's the internet or the fact that they have our book and they are calling and somehow find out about us, and they're doing it independently on their own. That was pretty unheard of, 20 years ago.
Sure. And yeah, it could be somebody in their 60s or so and looking to move or downsize. And, because there are these communities that are so active. Yeah. So they would be the ones directly that would be calling you.
Right. And, the other thing that I hadn't mentioned is that people think, nursing home, and they get really scared. We find that the nursing homes now are dealing with residents that are much more frail than they used to be, because it used to take the place of more assisted living, but now it's expanded. So the nursing home residents are older and more frail, and the assisted living category is able to handle the memory care and a little bit more of medical care, medical services, even if it's brought into the facility.
Right. That's interesting how that's kind of evolved over the years.
Yes, out of necessity.
Are there certain parts of the country that people are going to more that you're noticing as far as the geographically, what's happening around the country?
Well, like we find that, the larger states, that like California, Texas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, we get a lot of activity. Florida, of course. But we also find, and this has been the same story even 20, 25 years ago, where people would go to retire like in Florida, but if they become aged or a spouse passes on, they want to go back to their hometown.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's very common to find that. So, whether it's children, they could be in Florida and they could have been raised in Pennsylvania, but the kids are now in Texas. So now they're looking in Texas. So there's the need for information across the country to be accessible across the country.
Right. Yeah. Which is why also, your website is very easy to use and go through, and actually it's a great tool to find that information and then obviously eventually call you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you've talked about the changes in senior living options over the years. I mean, you've explained the whole range of living facilities. How do you think families can kind of ease their seniors into considering senior housing if it's the kids that call you? A word of advice to the kids of seniors as far as how they can talk about this with their parents. What's your advice on that?
Well, that's probably the most difficult question, and the most difficult problem for families, because there's such resistance to the unknown, and nobody wants to leave their home. So the easiest, we found, and we promoted very much so when the books came out, that by if you want to speak to your parent, and let's say you're in an area where there is a book, whether it's mine or another, that you're able to get this book that provides information to where there's familiarity down the road. And depending upon how imminent the need is, families can always tour a community. There might be resistance, but the communities often have lunches and events geared for residents and non-residents. That's like fun for everybody. A resident, being able to talk to a prospective resident is good for everyone.
Right. And then it kind of takes away they might go and have lunch or speak to some residents and then think, oh, this is kind of a nice place. It's nicer than I thought. Or
it's not a nursing home.
Right. And they explain their activities. And if they're getting positive feedback from residents, then, that's great.
Yeah, it really is good for everyone involved. And, we urge people to start the conversation or maybe talking about it when they think that that's something that might be good for their family member. Isolation is a very difficult problem, and we're finding it all the time. You can find it yourself during quarantining, that if you're isolated, it's very different than being with people and having activities and having a reason to get up and get dressed.
No matter what age.
No matter what age.
Yeah.
But certainly more so when an elderly person is having a family visit once a week.
Right. So speaking of the times right now. How has the pandemic affected your business and that of your clients?
It's affected it greatly because the communities had to have a lockdown where basically there could be no visitors. We know the issue with the elderly and with congregation. So family members couldn't visit. And we find, of course, the whole pandemic with people passing away in hospitals without family members. We also have family members unable to visit those in senior housing. Mm-hmm. And that's been a terrible isolating situation for families. They're just now in some states starting to allow visits, whether it be outside mostly, but that's starting to change a little.
Right. And keeping on this technology part of it, are people, are facilities allowing or not allowing, but enabling like Zoom tours where families maybe that are out of state can do a tour?
Oh, absolutely. And they've all produced video tours of their community, and they're doing a lot of things that have been done before as well, but maybe they've stepped it up somewhat. But for a while, the first few months of the pandemic, there were no admissions.
Right.
So, and quite frankly, our phone calls diminished, the activity on the website diminished. So people put a hold on looking into senior housing with the pandemic, but we see that changing now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's good for everybody.
It's good for everybody.
So what do you think what are some of the biggest issues facing seniors right now, would you say? I mean, aside from the COVID situation, what are some of the other issues that you see that have come up maybe in the past few years?
The financial issue is great. Mm-hmm. I mean, I will tell you that a number of the phone calls we receive have to do with financial issues and the lack of understanding. People think that, oh, well, I'll just get Medicaid and they will pay for my assisted living. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be more understanding on Medicare and what it pays for, Medicaid, and planning for the future.
Right.
The younger generation needs to really look into the long-term care insurance to protect themselves, where it helps with assisted living and home care. There are veterans benefits for veterans with assisted living and home care as well. And of course, nursing homes, depending on your need, that's where Medicaid comes in.
Right. Here at Gracefully Graying, we are posting content constantly and always. I mean, we just posted a great interview that Henry did with a woman who is a Medicare expert, talking about all the facets of Medicare. And, we really address all of these issues. So, with your input and the skills and excellence of, and professionals that we interview and, putting it all together, putting all the pieces together, we hope to become, our resource of great information, which, is helpful no matter who you are, what situation you're in.
I think what you're doing is great, and it's very informative in all the subjects. And I did watch that interview with.
Oh, you did?
Yes. And I thought, what a great service, because I know I had to get Medicare, and figuring out what Medicare to get, what plan to get, what was best for your family. It's not easy. And I'm sure there are many out there that it stymies a lot more than me. So I think she is providing some service. I forgot her name.
Joanne. Mm-hmm.
Joanne. Mm-hmm. And she did a great job with that.
And we talk to people, in the insurance business and the, you name it, the legal side of it, the financial side of it. I mean, you kind of have to put all of this together, and in some cases, maybe starting with you and your resources and people's needs for finding housing, and then putting all the other pieces together. It's so important.
Yes. I think, I think what you're doing is great with all of the different categories. I've looked at them, and it's so helpful.
Oh, well, thank you. So I want to know personally, what do you find most rewarding about your work?
Well, I would say that for years I'm marching to my own drum,
Mhm.
but I know that I'm helping people, and that without this help, from many years ago, there was the yellow pages.
Right.
And so it's so different today. We're such a more informed society, and I feel like I've contributed to that. So I'm proud of that, and that's rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, and on a very local level, I mean, the directories that you provide per geographic location, I mean, they are very, very specific to the areas that you're talking about, and people can learn a lot, and there's a lot of information there.
Yes, thank you.
Um, yeah. So tell me, what words of advice can you offer people kind of on the whole?
Well, besides plan, the younger people to plan for the future, and often you find that people looking for long-term care insurance are people that have dealt with a senior housing situation for their family member. But they have to oversee. Seniors have to be looked at all the time to make sure that they're safe. They're not progressing to where they might leave the stove on, or losing their hygiene habits,
Mhm.
not bathing. Their food it does not account for balanced nutrition. So they really have to be looked at for those specific things. I remember some time ago visiting with an aunt of mine who was the most immaculate woman. And I remember she had known I was coming, and she had spots all over her clothes.
Mm.
And it was, obvious to me this was a problem, and things needed to change. And family members have to be on the lookout for that. It's not just, oh, Mom, that top is dirty.
Sure.
It has to be, Mom, that top is dirty. We've got to do something about this.
Yeah.
So, and of course, with senior housing, the isolation that people feel, even if they don't want to leave their home and they don't feel that need, there is that need. We are sociable beings. And, as we talked earlier, the quarantine told us all about this isolation and depression.
Mhm.
And so all of that needs to be looked at and see whether that is the right thing for your family member.
Great. Well, believe it or not, we've run out of time. But I want you just tell people briefly how they can get a hold of you. And we are also putting that contact frame at the end of this interview.
Oh, great. Well, if they want to book, they can call me directly at toll-free 800-350-0770, extension 207. We'll send out a book. They're free of charge. And our website, alternativesforseniors.com, as well. Or they can call our call center as well.
Great. So thank you so much for joining us. This was great. I've learned a lot. I know our viewers will as well. So we thank you for being on Gracefully Graying. And to those of you watching, thank you for joining us. Again, visit our website, gracefullygraying.com, and visit our YouTube channel and search for Gracefully Graying. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.